Hi everyone. I have read your discussion boards and your step 3 of your PICO question project and have provided feedback to you in the rubric. There's probably a lot more feedback than you want. Do not panic if you have lots and lots of highlights and lots of comments. I want to remind you that the primary purpose of feedback in any assignment should be to teach. It should be to give you feedback so that you can understand a better way of doing things or areas for growth for you. Sometimes when you get feedback and you feel like nothing you did was right, or there's highlights everywhere, or there's comments everywhere, you can get a little discouraged. The complexity of writing this kind of evidence-based project can be pretty cumbersome and can be very challenging, especially if you've not done it well. I would be remiss to ignore addressing opportunities for your own growth. So I want you to read feedback that's been provided to you for these projects in the context that it is intended, which is to help grow you and provide feedback for your own learning. If you're ever getting feedback that's unclear to you, or you feel like we need to talk more about it, know that I'm here. My office hours are available in Starfish now. Please make an appointment. And because this is a group project, if you can have as many of your group come to that appointment, that would be great. Only one of you needs to make an appointment. And this kind of project, try to give yourself about 30 minutes so that I can sit down with you and walk through the feedback and help provide clarity. This is a progressive assignment. So like you've done all along, you're going to go back to the beginning of the paper and you're going to make revisions based on the feedback that you've been provided. The idea in the revision process is that you are continually improving the product of your project. It would not be the best practice for you to kind of draw a line in the sand after each version of your project and go from step 3 to step 4 and not make corrections in step 1, step 2, and step 3. This is going to be a fluid paper, a well-written paper that's well organized and scholarly by the time you're done. My hope is that as you're going through this process, you're thinking, okay, why are we doing this? And to be reminded that part of evidence-based practice is understanding how to find the evidence and then be able to apply the evidence. So when we think about the research process, we think about, I'm going to ask a relevant research question. I'm going to ask a question that's meaningful to my practice area. It's the reason we use NURS-sensitive indicators, not random topics. The NURS-sensitive indicators are important to your practice. So that's the bucket you chose from when you identified your research question. We ask you to go into the literature and be able to discern good literature versus poor literature, recent literature versus old literature, when we use seminal literature, when we don't. Understanding the difference between a real research article and a commentary or an editorial or other kinds of gray literature. Being able to pull those things together, read them with some understanding and organize them for you all in an annotated bibliography format. And then be able to do an analysis. Go through those articles and be able to say, okay, these articles all agree in these few concepts, and maybe 2 agree in this, but 3 agree in this, and be able to organize that so that as you write your analysis, you have the organization of the positive associated findings, the things that were commonly agreed upon by multiple authors. And then you're going to have a section of, these are the things that didn't line up. These are the things that were outliers. This is the new thing. This is different than everybody else found. Sometimes you're going to involve some comparing and contrasting of your population. Sometimes you're going to look at, variabilities in sample size. Most of the time, you're really going to focus on the content and the findings of those research articles. And that crux of that analysis is going to help you answer your PICO question. Based on the groupings of these findings, based on the number of outlying or differing opinions, I can make a affirmative statement to support my PICO question. I can say, yep, my intervention or your intervention is more beneficial than my comparator or that traditional method. That's the purpose in this. So you can answer your PICO question, which was a part of this assignment. You're also going to look at limitations. I asked you to kind of look at the limitations that were reported by your authors and be able to kind of create a summary statement of what limitations did you find within the body of literature you selected. Pardon me. I didn't ask you to look at type 1 and type 2 errors or author bias. I really just wanted you to read the limitation section and figure out Is this a problem? And then, of course, creating a scholarly paper that was written using APA formatting. I'll remind you again, APA formatting is more than periods, commas, parentheses, and the use of capital letters. It's the syntax, the flow of writing in your organization. This iteration of the paper really benefited from organizing using level headings as well as combined in-text citations. If that was something you struggled with, my encouragement is that you go in and you use the resources that have been provided to you within this course. If that has not met your needs, the Writing Center is always available to give feedback on papers that are in the process. So I'm going to encourage you to use that resource outside of the course as well. So before I get too far, I have pulled up an example of an integrative literature review. This is a student paper, and this is kind of an advanced version of what you're doing. The reason I'm using this is because it really is a student paper. It is not perfect, but there's some elements in it that this student did really well, and I want you to see what that looks like. Before I get too far, I do want to comment on this week's discussion board. I was super impressed with your attention to how the evidence-based practice supported policy and your discussion with that. Twan made the comment in the end of his primary thread that said, family presence is an essential part of our patients' care. With the ongoing support from various medical and nursing organizations with published guidelines, we can fully provide the holistic care that our patients and their families deserve. Twan tied up put a really good packaging on what many of you said, which is we really want to be patient-centered, but we also need to involve the family and the support system as we begin to plan care and provide care. And I really appreciate the fact that you all were able to connect that in Twan's words of being able to really understand that when we talk about holistic care, we're talking about the patient in context of the world they live in, the family system and social system that supports them. And so many of you touched on that and did a fantastic job with that. So that was very well done. Now let's shift gears and talk a little bit about APA. You guys are doing a great job with your title page. Some things I want to point out. When we talk about the use of direct quotes and when to use a quotation versus using your own words, I'm going to remind you that it is always preferred that you read something that an author wrote and that you place the understanding you get from that body of information in your own words and use an in-text citation. You want to avoid direct quotes as much as possible. Occasionally you're going to use a direct quote because there's no better way to say something. It's just perfectly written by an author. And folks, those are zebras, not horses. In most papers that are published, you won't see maybe one or two, if that, direct quotes. I realize that that's different for you and that you guys have really been, kind of pounded in your head. Okay, anytime you use somebody's words, you make sure that you properly give them credit. And so you've been very wary of plagiarism. So direct quoting almost feels like a safety net. Because we're using in-text citations, because you are going to paraphrase or give new words to an author's body of work, you're still giving them credit. And it's more important that you can express an understanding of what you read versus regurgitating and copying what the author wrote. One of the hazards in copying direct quotes and putting them in the bodies of paper is very often you lose context and it's almost jarring. You're reading along and I'm listening to your voice or your content, and all of a sudden I have a very different syntax, a very different flow, and it feels unnatural. It can be disruptive to your paper. It's also important, because this is an academic setting, that you tell me what you understood from what the author wrote. If your paper is buried in direct quotes, what I can glean from that is you're connecting the dots, but you may or may not really understand what those authors were saying. So as an effort to improve your scholarly effort and your scholarly writing, my encouragement is that direct quotes again become zebras, or even better, unicorns, very rarely seen. So I want you to process that and begin to think about what that looks like. The other thing with direct quotes, if there is something that there's just no better way to say it, and it is more than 40 words of a direct quote from that author or author group, that needs to be in a block quote format. It needs to not be buried in a sentence, but actually have its own formatting. And you can find the method of doing that within Purdue OWL. Just look up block quotes and it'll tell you how to do that. And again, the word count is when it hits 40, it goes into a block quote. And again, that is something that should not be done very often. It is very rarely that any of us say 40 whole words that are so impressive that they need to be in block quotes, unless you're famous or a historian. We're just regular people. So I want you to be thoughtful about that. If you do feel that a direct quote is necessary, most of you are doing really well with direct quotes and adding the page number or the paragraph location of where you're going to find that direct quote, which is great. If you are not directly quoting a body of work or the words of an author, the page number is not required. APA has been really fuzzy about page numbers, but the commonly accepted way is to put page numbers with direct quotes, not without direct quotes. If you add them without a direct quote, that's okay. It's not necessarily wrong, but it's an extra step you don't need to go through if you are paraphrasing and using your own words to explain what the author wrote and how it's related. Okay, so I'm looking. Okay, I think that's it on the direct quotes. This is a very well organized paper, and I want to point out a few things to you. First of all, I want to point out the use of level headings. Level 1 headings are normally used to cover major topics. In published papers, it's normally a section, so big sections. With this paper, it is not, it's just different topics. So you can see that this student has used level 1 headings in the first section of their paper. And they're all appropriately used. As you move through it and they begin to be more granular or begin to focus on smaller details, you're going to find this under the literature search section. This is an integrative literature review. Your paper does not have all these elements, so please don't try to copy this into your bubble. You will make your head hurt. So they actually had to explain their literature review process, what their search methods are, what their keywords were, and again, all of that is something that you have not been required to do. So I'm going to keep scrolling. Okay, so here's where we shift, where this student did their analysis and selection. And you can see that here they have gone from a level 1 heading to a level 2 heading. This level 2, which is the included articles, is directly related to the analysis and selection subheading. As they go through the excluded articles, they come in and address literature reviews and education surveys, as well as video value subsections. These are level 3 headings. This is also a good time to pause and point out that anytime you make a statement about some or two or several articles agreed or said this, there should be a direct quote. There should be in-text citations that are combined within the body of that sentence. So this student wrote, for the articles were literature reviews, 4 of the articles were literature reviews. And she wrote the groupings of authors in alphabetical order. So you can see that she's got author 1, the second set, the third set, and then the fourth. Because she said there were 4 articles that were literature reviews, she made clear which 4 of the list. I think they had 30 articles. These 4 were the ones that were literature reviews. One article is a literature review and a meta-analysis. That's an example of, okay, there were 4 that were this, but then there was one that was different. And if you go through this process, you can read how this student discerned which was which and how that was coordinated. Again, another example, 3 other articles appeared to meet the initial inclusion criteria since the abstract details debriefing strategies, and here are those 3 author sets. This is an example of in-text citation usage. You were not going to use the name of the articles. You are only going to use the authors, and you can do that in the body of the sentence. You can list the authors with their date of publication if it's a single article. But if you're going to reference multiple articles finding the same finding, you're going to do exactly what this student says, which is 3 articles or 4 articles found this. And then you're going to put them in a group in-text citation following it. Remember that in-text citation that's combined, has multiple authors in it, is always done in alphabetical order. Okay, I think that's it for level headings, the use, excuse me, Another good example of using the names of the authors with a single author set is here, one article by. And so instead of saying the name of the article, this student correctly used one article by Mengel, Bailey, Schnell, and Whitaker and Vogel. 2013 seemed very promising upon initial review. So that's their way of saying the article that these folks wrote was promising. And then she goes on to explain more about that article. As you can see, the more numbers of articles that you have that have common themes, this becomes kind of tedious. You can see that these in-text citations, there's a pile of them, and that they get repeated if they're the same 5. Sometimes it doesn't feel intuitive, but I assure you that when you are properly using combined in-text citations and you found articles that had common themes, it will make sense for you. You've only been asked to do 10 to 15 articles, so you're not going to have 5 and 6 authors' work piled into an in-text citation, but you're going to have 2 or 3, and you may have to repeat those 2 or 3 several times if they collectively agreed on several findings. Don't mean to make you dizzy. I'm just making sure I've hit all of the highlights. Another point about level headings is you can see they follow just like, and I'm not sure whether you guys still in high school, whether you used the Roman numeral paper outline format where you had the Roman numeral 1 and then the capital letter, lowercase letter, that actually built on how you wrote a paper and the paragraphs and how they went together. Level headings are very much the same way. So here under a level 2, which is included articles goes under the level 1 heading, which was way back here, which was the analysis and selection. So this student chose to do 2 level 2s, which was included and excluded articles. And then under those 2 level 2 headings, the student used level 3 headings to further subdivide by topic. And you can see these headings are concise. Level 2, both words start with capital letters. Level 3, the first word is a capital letter, the second one is a lowercase, and it's followed by a period. Okay. Level 4 would be this in italic font. Okay. So we've talked about the flow of level 1, level 2, and level 3 headings, the fact that they need to go under each other. When you look at included articles, just like we did in excluded articles, here are level 3 headings. And this heading of studies in correct population and topics directly is related to the included articles. The studies for correct population and topic were part of included articles, much like studies with interprofessional population on one topic or video assisted debriefing. So that's kind of the flow of here. I'm looking through my notes. Okay, I think that's it. Real quick, let's run through. Again, don't mean to make you dizzy. I just don't want to take too much time. In all of my scrolling, I have messed up her formatting. Okay, so your reference page, of course, is at the top. Be sure to remember that from now on, your reference page should be only your references. Your annotated bibliography was done to help you organize and summarize your findings. It is not part of this paper unless you have a dying desire to do an appendix, and then you may put it in an appendix. I don't think that's a necessary step or a hassle that you need to go through, but you do have that option. But again, it's an appendix. Your reference list always needs to be reconciled, and I did not go through your paper and your reference list on this version of step 3 to make sure that everything that was in your paper is in your reference list. I will be doing that to prepare for step 4. So when you submit step 4, I'm going to make sure that what is in your reference list is actually used in your paper. So before you submit step 4, have somebody on your team print out your reference list, print out your paper, or you can do it virtually, however works for you. I'm a printout paper person. Go through your reference list and check your paper and make sure if it's in your reference list, did you actually cite it? And if you didn't cite it, should you have? And then make those corrections and get them into an alignment. Not reconciling your reference list and what publishers would call padding your reference list by piling on things you didn't actually use is a form of plagiarism. It's saying I used references that I didn't really use, or not properly citing your work can also be a form of plagiarism. So I want you to be aware of that as a scholarly step to professional writing and to writing at the undergraduate level. So be mindful of reconciling your reference list. Again, as I've given you feedback, if I gave you feedback on step 2 and you didn't translate it into step 3, you may see comments that say, go back and look at the previous step. Also be aware that as I've given you feedback, if I've said it once, I'm not going to go through and correct all of the same errors. If it's something you just keep doing, it's likely you've kept doing it because you didn't know you weren't supposed to. So me repeatedly correcting it is not a necessary step or good use of my energy or your time. So I have corrected it, and very often what you'll see behind it is this is a recurrent error. If I've said, you're not using the proper format for in-text citations, look at what I've said, fix it, and then go check the rest of your in-text citations. If I have said, that you're having issues with capitalization with article names, look at the one I'm dealing with, go back through APA, fix it, and then go double check all of them. I'm not going to fix every one of them. So just be mindful of that. Okay, I have run out of my to-do list, all the things I needed to say. Folks, don't get discouraged. Even if you did really well, and some of you did really well on this step, this feels like a lot of work. Keep in mind that the vast majority of your grade for a 400 level course is this project. So the weight of it is real. My hope is that this paper is not quite as painful as multiple tests. My hope is that you're learning and that you're beginning to appreciate what is true evidence-based practice look like, and how are you going to use this process, maybe in pieces and parts, when you practice as a nurse in a very few short months. So know that I'm here. Know that my appointments are available. If you and your group want to chat with me in Starfish, I'm here. I'm on campus every Thursday to be able to meet with you. Emergent questions that we need to deal with quickly, send to me by email, and I'm happy to chat prior to that time. You are not in this by yourself. Please ask questions and seek assistance as you feel appropriate. I will look forward to seeing you guys soon. Take care.